Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to about our 10th presentation of COVID. We've covered very many areas. Today is a personal favorite of mine. Jury trials, figuring out what juries are going to do. I still am a big believer in the way you evaluate a case is what a jury will do with it. It's not how much your company wants to pay. That's their decision later. But they base it on what a jury is going to do with it. Well, by the way, this is day 64 of the COVID beard. We've been sheltering in place for 64 days. I think by the time I get back to the office, it's going to look like ZZ Top, if any of you know ZZ Top. Oh, by the way, that was Celine Dion from 1996 and All By Myself. We felt that was appropriate with our sheltering days. Remember, there's a Q&A button up there for you to work with and leave us questions. We generally have a lot of questions, can't get to all of them, but we do post them on our website for later. Our subject today, we're trying to extrapolate from the past to decide what's going to happen in the future. Never in my career has it been like this, where there's nothing substantial to hold on to pick what's going to happen. I work with a lot of research groups. I've done 200 plus jury trials. More importantly, I've done between 30 and 40 research trials. That's when you really learn a lot. About 20 years ago, I had 2 or 3 research trial groups that I worked with. All of them were good, but there was one about 10 years ago that emerged as the one to go to, who would always answer the questions, who would always give me the information I need. I realized about that time that I always wanted to take a gun to a knife fight. And I want to introduce you to my gun. Adam Boesen, are you there?
I am. Hi, Steve. Thank you.
Hi, Adam. Adam is, he's not sheltering in place unless you call the French Quarter in Louisiana sheltering in place. He's down there for getting ready for a research trial himself. And I appreciate Adam joining us. Adam used to be with CSI in Dallas, and you may recognize CSI's name because they're the ones that helped work with Oprah Winfrey back when the beef cattle guys sued her for running away their market. Dr. Phil was one of the main guys in that group. He was spawned from there to his show, and I think Adam would tell you in a moment at the bar that spawn is the correct word for that transition. But Adam is a trained industrial psychologist. He's definitely done over 500 preps, research trials, mock juries, focus groups, probably closer to 1,000. He's in practice with his wife, who is a PhD neuropsychologist, who it always makes me a little nervous when I go to dinner with them because I know they're sitting there analyzing me, and that makes for an uncomfortable evening. All right, Adam, I'll call you back in just a second.
Very good. Thanks again, Steve.
Thank you, sir. Adam and I are actually doing a look at nursing home cases. We think that's a good microcosm to look at because they were a very down industry before COVID. How are they coming out of this when a lot of the deaths are there, but the staff's clearly doing everything they can? So we'll be doing a bunch of those over the summer. He'll be in those, and I'll post on that. We'll probably start doing the jury trial side of this. We might do a monthly version because it's changing fast and things are happening. I'm very involved in the opioid litigation. All of these things have to figure in for us what's going on with this. But first, as always, let me go to the Holden Institute to just see what's going on out in the regular world. Let's see. Wuhan retesting all 11 million of their citizens to avoid second wave of the coronavirus. That shows you their fear of the coronavirus, and they have maintained it pretty well. Texas, we've seen America's biggest one-day jump in COVID-19 cases this past Saturday with 1,801. I wouldn't get too excited by that. A lot of that is there is more testing. So that's the trouble with numbers. Sometimes we jump to them and make conclusions. that may not be the correct conclusion. Another interesting point, 100,000 crew members are still stuck on the cruise ships. There are suicides, hunger strikes, panic. So it just shows it's still moving out there. Another interesting point, the first case of the coronavirus was detected in the Amazon jungle. Folks, it's everywhere. It's everywhere. Adam, come back on, please, and we'll get you started here. At the end of the presentation, I want to spend about 5 minutes talking about Modena. I'm going to turn Adam loose toward the end because he's got to run to get ready for his research trial. And Adam, we do appreciate you taking the time to join us today on this subject. So, Adam, I will step out. I may step in a couple times because and tag team this, but not too much. I'll try to stay out of your way.
All right, we'll jump in anytime. I know you like to tag team, I do as well. Hello, everyone. Great to have you join us today, and I look forward to your Q&A. I'll jump right into this. You know, as Steve said, we have very little data as we face one of the most critical time periods in our country and also in our industry. The challenge really that I want to address today is a daunting one. It's trying to look at what might the effects of this pandemic, this crisis, be on the litigation industry as a whole. That's a massive question. We do have some ways that we can speak to this, ways that I think are not just accurate and predictive, but also usable by anyone who's in a litigation risk management position. Fundamentally, the way that I approach answering this question, of course, is through a psychological lens, looking at the psychology of persuasion, the psychology of being a juror, et cetera. Steve's right, it's actually north of 1,000 cases that I've worked in my career. Now, there are certain lessons that we can apply, and that's what we're going to share with you today. First of all, I want to start with the psychology of a crisis and how it can impact the way that jurors across the board, across the nation, respond to a fact pattern. So any true crisis, any national or global crisis, it carries with it new threats that come to dominate the mindset of a culture. And along with those threats come new narratives, new stories of sacrifice, and new stories of selfishness. And we become fascinated with these. I know I spend a good deal of time every day scouring through traditional and social media, looking for patterns among these stories. And you know, the new villains and the new heroes of this crisis are already emerging. We're seeing terms that everyone uses regularly now, essential workers. You're looking at the new heroes across healthcare. Obviously, they've always been heroes, but something new has happened where they're being lionized. When you have a hero as a category, like firefighters as an example from 2 crises ago, back in 9/11, they are given the benefit of the doubt in litigation. They are assumed to be carrying good motives. People want to reward them. And when we look at the new heroes of today, the essential workers, the healthcare workers, we look at some of the heroism in the stories going on inside nursing homes, you begin to see how we might be able to take a fresh look at even pre-existing litigation. So let's back up a second and look at the most recent or previous crisis, that being the 2008 financial crisis. Prior to that, in our research, our mock trial research, it was very common for us to hear comments from jurors regarding all the frivolous lawsuits. The anti-litigation sentiments were much, much stronger at the time. Really at the turn of this century was probably the peak, but still all the way up until 2008, it was very common for us to hear jurors talking about anti-litigation feelings. Today, it's very, very rare. Something happened. In 2008, when the financial crisis hit, at the risk of being overly simplistic, Wall Street was bailed out and Main Street was abandoned. This is the narrative that took hold in the minds of many, many jurors. Now, there were always anti-corporate sentiments that we would hear on occasion prior. But after that, and especially in the years that followed, as Wall Street went on a record tear and unemployment remained low, wages stagnant, we really saw a story of two Americas emerge. And what we saw really was anti-corporate sentiments became the norm. We've all heard of social inflation, nuclear verdicts. It's our belief that the 2008 financial crisis, the villains that emerged, and how this seized a hold of the national psyche is the true cause of the rise of social inflation and nuclear verdicts. And so we return to today. And the question really is, how will this crisis impact litigation, not just for cases that have a COVID-19 element to them, but all litigation. Litigation that existed prior to this crisis could also be radically impacted. As we look across what's happening here, you can see that we have these new villains, but also these new heroes. In 2008, there really were no new heroes. Today, what we have is a pattern that we want you to focus in on. So first, here are some outcomes that we've seen already emerging in this crisis. The essential workers that I mentioned, being unable to quarantine, forced to go out and work because they need the money. Meanwhile, the wealthy stay home on their staycations. We see this narrative reflected over and over again throughout the media. So what will the impact be on litigation involving wealthy individuals if you have a jury filled with essential workers? It could very well alter your analysis. We look at stories of employers who've taken extraordinary measures to protect their employees. We see these stories every day. We also see stories of employers who are attempting to force their workers by threatening to have them furloughed or laid off and bring in other people if they don't do the work, even without the proper protective equipment. And so our question becomes, how will employment litigation be impacted? What will happen is that jurors will be looking for these narratives. They have in their mind these new stories, stories of selfishness and sacrifice by employers. These are new stories that will come to dominate jurors' attempts to make meaning out of those fact patterns. We encourage everyone on this call and everyone who is in the role of a litigation risk manager to look for these type of stories in the fact patterns of the cases that you're managing. Healthcare workers, one of the newly lionized heroes, and rightfully so. So how might this impact medical malpractice cases across the board? Obviously, when someone is a hero, as I said, they get the benefit of the doubt. We expect to see more defense verdicts generally across medical malpractice cases. However, there's another side to that coin. One of the new villains emerging, potentially, is the healthcare administrator. We see stories all the time now of questions, why are these supplies not in place? Why do we not have the protective equipment in place? And occasionally you see stories of administrators with claims of fraud or corruption being at the source of a lack of these. If you have any case that even comes close to having a pattern of fraud and corruption by a healthcare administrator, it could easily trigger some of the negative responses and anger going on in the society today. Essentially, people are looking for someone to blame. If you see these patterns, you might have to readjust, even in something that does not have a COVID-19 element. Nursing home litigation, obviously, is one of the first frontiers of actual COVID-type claims. What we are beginning to see is that there is, in fact, and expectedly so, a belief that is shifting Previously in research, what we would find is that nursing home staff were considered to be just assumed to be the bottom of the barrel of healthcare workers. Jurors' initial comments, even the absence of evidence, would be, well, they're probably not very talented, not very skilled, bottom of their class, and maybe even morally suspect. What we expect to see going forward is a radical shift, where now the nursing home staff are being given the benefit of the doubt. Stories of sacrifice, risking their own lives to save others. Stories of resourcefulness as they fashion their own protective equipment to continue to take care of the aging services residents, etc. We're also, however, hearing stories of facilities that were not even prepared for a standard flu season. Stories of facilities that have not been able to even stay focused long enough to contact loved ones when someone that is a resident passes away. These stories are flashpoints. They may well be understandable within the context of the lawsuit, but if they're triggering the anger of the populace as we go through this, and they begin to see the villains that they read about, your litigation could be in serious threat. So look for those as well. One more big area that we're seeing is I'm not sure
Adam, could I jump in there a second?
Yeah, sure.
On that subject, the villains and the heroes. Most people know about Disneyland, Disney World, the way they operate, and they have people walking around cleaning up at all times. You may not realize that they're taught to sweep up something in their bucket, even if there's nothing to sweep up. Why? Because everybody that walks down that street goes, my Lord, this is a clean place. All right, how's that play in your businesses? If you're a carrier with the folks that you're trying to help out to make them where they are the heroes and not the villains, you need for the public to understand you're going over and above the call of duty. Masks don't do as much actual help as we wish they did, but they send a very powerful message. I represent the pharmacies in the opioid litigation. The pharmacies, if they are showing the public that we are a caring citizen and we care about you and we've got on masks and we've got the cleaner and we've got social distancing, it sends a message, a subconscious message actually, that this place is taking care of you. And those, in my opinion, Adam, will be the ones at the winner. The utilities need to be the same way out on the street. The cable guy who comes to the house, that all sends a message that that company is either caring about you or they don't care about you. And that's, go ahead, Adam. I just wanted that to seem like the proper place.
Yeah, no, that's, I agree. Look, let's shift away from this. The stories that we could cover are still emerging, as I said. But the bottom line really is that the juror's job is to stand in the shoes of the parties of the case, look around, see through their eyes, look at the context within which decisions are made, and then make an evaluation. Are these decisions reasonable or unreasonable? Right now, what people are doing in their own lives is they are making risk-reward decisions about keeping themselves safe. This is the biggest story, bigger than any of the stories that I've mentioned so far, is the story that each of us are living right now, especially as the states begin to end quarantines and open up. Every single one of us is making a daily choice about our safety, about the safety of the people that we care about, and balancing these against the rewards that we seek. Should I get a haircut, or is it too risky? Should I go out and see a movie, or is it not soon enough? Do I wear this mask? Do I not wear the mask? Do I do it for others, even if I don't believe that it works? These choices are risk-reward decisions. I think one of the most fundamental things that we're going to see as a result of this pandemic is that jurors as a whole are going to be far more receptive to the defense themes. Generally, a defense theme is that they made the best balanced decisions that they can, trying to achieve the right path forward without making unreasonable decisions. I believe that a lot of the plaintiff themes that have been prevailing over the last 10 years will be a little bit more difficult to land. The theme that safety and profit exist in a zero-sum world where there's a binary decision where you either seek profits over safety or safety over profits. Those type of simple cartoonish narratives that have been so effective, especially with some of the reptile methodologies, they will be counter to the experience that we are all having every day as we try to engage in our own risk-reward decisions. I think that as we begin to look across litigation and at the fact patterns, if you can see any of these type of decisions in a way that are similar to or fit the pattern of your clients in litigation, there's an opportunity to tap into the juror experience. I think this could have a radical impact, potentially, on the face of litigation. I think that this could potentially shift us away from the era of social inflation trending upward at an accelerating pace with the nuclear verdicts becoming more and more common. But it could also, at the same time, result in, well, fewer large verdicts. The ones that land could be extraordinarily high. So what we're really looking at, I think, is a period of volatility. While we expect to see perhaps more defense verdicts, we expect to see even higher nuclear verdicts. The reason for this is people will be looking for someone to blame, especially as we shift from quarantine to rebuilding the economy. When we begin to realize the real damage that's happened to ourselves and to our businesses and to the economy as a whole, there will be a reckoning. And jurors will come out like the citizens with torches looking for a monster. And you need to realize who the villains in these new narratives are. And if those can be cast as your clients, the insured, then you need to adjust the risk profile there as well. One thing I want to add on to here that I think is a macro outcome that we're watching very closely in our research is potentially a new villain, a new category of villain, is the expert themselves. We see every day failures of experts, failures of authorities, agencies, and failures of institutions to foresee, to respond, or even to agree. Through this pandemic, the question, do we wear masks? Don't we wear masks? That's just a flashpoint, a symbol for all of our experience through this. The trust in experts was already eroding. Generation Y and the new Generation Z inherently are skeptical of experts. We think throughout this experience, what might happen is what happened to corporations. While there was suspicion before, after 2008, anti-corporate beliefs became the norm. Same with experts, with institutions, and with authorities. While there was skepticism before, after this, it may well be a question that is asked and answered. You cannot rely on an expert. And so if you have a case that relies heavily on authority, on agencies and their standards, if you're relying very heavily on your expert, you need to perhaps readjust the way that you're evaluating your case, because that may not hold nearly as well as it used to in the past. Steve, let's open this up a little bit, either to some questions from you, or I'm curious to see if we have questions from the audience. It's probably a good time to adjust.
Yes, I actually, I'm going to use this moment to get some free advice. I told the audience earlier that I represent the pharmacy industry in the opioid litigation. Obviously, dangerous litigation because you have the rank and file on the streets, the regular voters, the regular jurors, are totally in the class of people that have either had it themselves, had it in their families, etc. And if you can't answer this, that's fine. Maybe it's too early. But how will COVID change those optics for a jury looking at it in the next year?
Give me a little bit more on that, because I think I want to make sure that I'm understanding your question.
Well, it's the typical tough case regardless, even if COVID had never happened. You know, it had its problems because your jury pool was, you know, if you don't watch it, it's what I call they're certified for the plaintiff. You know, and you and I have talked about this before. We talked the pharmacy stuff over quite frequently. Now, will COVID change that? Will it have no impact, you think, on something such a volatile situation?
I hope I'm answering this, but what I do know is that anti-corporate belief, like anything, is not monolithic. There are some industries that are more suspect and more vilified amongst jurors generally than others. And, you know, chemical companies, pharmaceutical companies are the top of the heap in terms of being targets for anti-corporate beliefs. Right now, there's a possibility, I suppose, that they will be our saviors. However, what we're seeing is that there's a lot of increased skepticism and doubt going on as to whether they'll be capable. I think what we're really going to see is a belief that it's the large pharmaceutical companies who failed us, but it might be the small upstarts, the ones who are nimble and resourceful and retooled and did something creative and extraordinary that become the heroes. I don't think that we're going to see a radical shift in terms of attitudes toward pharmaceutical companies. And so I'm not sure that we've seen enough yet to believe that it'll alter anything for any particular case.
And later in the program, after you have to exit, we're going to go to the Moderna model,
Right.
the vaccine on that. This is a drug company coming to the rescue if it works out.
Yep.
It's supplied by, you know, I represent pharmacies. It's supplied by pharmacies. There should be, I would hope, some shift toward understanding why pharmaceuticals, and to a lesser extent pharmacies, I don't think pharmacies get the corporate blame even close to what
Right.
Big Pharma gets. But I would expect some shift coming, let's say Moderna happens, and by early 2021, we've got a vaccine. Yay, Moderna.
Right.
Do we see a shift back a little bit toward Big Pharma, and that will have some fallout for my pharmacies and things of that nature?
We very well could. What we need to watch for is this. I think it's a question that is teed up, but we don't know what the answer will be. What we need to watch for are the successes and the failures. So if there are new promises of new drugs, and perhaps here's an outcome that I can imagine. There's a new drug that is proven safe and effective, and they can't produce enough, and it goes to the elite. Or there are stories of corruption where there's a problem with the distribution or a problem with the production itself, etc. Then you will see people really, really begin to villainize someone. Who's to blame for there being a drug that could save all of us that I can't get, that my loved ones can't get, that only special people or the elite can get? These stories of corruption and failure on a massive scale, these are the ones that lead to villainizations. And so I hope that doesn't happen, but we need to watch for it.
Luckily, Adam, our politicians have showed us that it's not a good thing to point fingers and blame everybody else. I'm being a little facetious, because that seems to be what's going around Washington right now. Is it's always somebody else's fault. But I guess, and a lot of our audience will understand this, juries get to pick whose fault it is. And even though they're not supposed to come into it with ideas, they do, and they have impressions. And that goes back to my discussion about what Disneyland does to make you think it's always clean. Same way with any of your businesses, you want that jury thinking nothing but the best about you. I've had it happen with truckers. Walmart does a great job with their trucking industry, and I've actually had jurors exclude themselves from the jury trial because they couldn't be fair to Walmart, because they couldn't believe that a Walmart trucker would have been driving overtime, have been on, it wasn't a meth case, but have had the problem. So this juror actually said, no, I with Walmart being sued, I would vote for Walmart unless it was just overwhelming. And the federal judge says, sir, you have to go, which is the correct thing to do. But what you want to be able to get to that is that feeling. But how do you get to that feeling? Because Walmart truckers on the roads day in, day out are the friendliest, kindest drivers on the road. Never speeding, never causing problems, always helping with problems. You'll even see a Walmart trucker sometimes stop to help someone along the side of the road. Oh my gosh, would I like to have that in every trucking case. No, I get the ones where we have all the broken windshields from the rocks from the oil trucks. And jurors don't like that. All right, I'll get to some questions from the audience now for you, Adam. Sure. You kind of talked about some of this, or we have, but here's the question. How can we apply these concepts to evaluate real cases? Is it too early, given that cases might not go to jury for at least a year or two?
Yeah, in fact, that's a very important concept. The idea, the fact that a lot of the cases that you may be evaluating today would not go before an actual jury for a year or two. And look, the labels of hero and villain can be dynamic. They don't always last forever. And so this is a difficult and challenging job, using these new heroes and new villains as a lens to evaluate the risk profile of any piece of litigation. But starting sooner is better. It took us years as an industry to wake up and realize the effects of the 2008 financial crisis on jurors in the deliberation rooms. To put those connections together, I'm not sure that the industry really fully understands it today. We have an opportunity to begin scanning as individuals and as a group for these new narratives in the fact patterns. The key is this. First, realize who are the heroes and the villains of this crisis. What are the stories that we are seeing repeated over and over and over again throughout the media, and what are the stories that are really capturing our imagination nationally? Then you look for those same patterns or same opportunities for patterns to emerge within your own litigation and within the fact pattern. So just for example, stories of corruption amongst administrators, either at healthcare facilities or otherwise, that result in people being left at risk, people not being as protected as they should have been. These stories have been around forever, but they will be more likely to capture the attention of the jurors going forward. So you look and you say, maybe I should increase my assessment of the risk profile of this particular piece of litigation.
We've got lots of questions, and we can't get to. Let me give you the next one. And this is to Adam. You shared some thoughts on the genesis of nuclear verdicts over the past decade. Can you expand on that, please?
Yeah, let me back up and just take a broad view at this. There's a psychology to it, and I'll cover that and then, maybe go a little bit deeper. But the view is is that when jurors are impaneled, and they take their oath, they view, and they're properly so, that their job is to make the decision on their own, do their best to make the right decision. They're scared that they're going to do it wrong, and they don't want to trust anyone. And so what they're going to do is they're going to look to their own experiences, their own history, and look for something that they've seen before. Look for their own wisdom. This is the source of jury psychology, is understanding that jurors don't trust counsel, they don't understand the law, they don't understand the facts of the case, and so they're going to use their own judgment. And so in 2008, the stories of the day that were dominating people's understanding, people's lives, were stories of corruption, were stories of greed amongst the financial elite, and they were seeing them being bailed out. There were stories of people losing their homes after having been tricked, stories of people losing their careers, unemployment.
Luckily, Adam, nobody will be losing their home or not eating or having problems out of COVID, right?
Right. Yeah, that's right. So the point is is that prior to this, there was anti-corporate belief sporadically throughout our culture. Afterwards, it became the norm. And when that became the norm, suddenly people were looking for, is this one of the bad ones? Is this one of the bad corporations? Is this one of the bad executives? I know they're out there. I'm looking for the villain. And then when we have something that fits that pattern, that's where nuclear verdicts come from. This was a fundamental shift.
Adam, it feeds into what I know and what I've studied over this COVID and all my years of practice. The narrative that my clients have to build is the narrative of the good guys. And this goes right into a question that someone has asked of me about the politics of COVID. What are we going to do so that the plaintiff bar doesn't grab the narrative and run with it, making us the villain? Here's what I see, folks. And I've seen it all my life, and every carrier, every client, every corporation agrees with me 100%, but few put their money where their mouth is. And I say this because the plaintiff bar puts their money where their mouth is. And you know where they get their money? Out of your left pocket. Let's take some of that money out of our right pocket, that's our money, and let's create our narrative. Some of that is the narrative of, like I said, when you go into one of my pharmacy clients, you've got on your mask. You're sending that message that you're a good place. Some of it is just feel-good advertising. I've defended bad faith cases for Geico. You know how much that gecko has saved Geico over the decades? They are building a narrative that's a good feel. They also get the message that it's good insurance, but they get the good feel. Same way with flow. They know flow. I'm not telling you exactly how to do it because there's 1,000 ways to do it, but we have to put the money that we still have toward building our narrative and quit giving it to the plaintiff's bar to build their narratives. I've paid $9 million on a case in settlement that I didn't think was worth $1.5 million. Okay? That doesn't help. That doesn't help. Got more questions? Got some questions. Adam, go ahead and respond to that.
Yeah, let me address that very quickly also. One of the questions that I receive is always, well, it's hard to even imagine how we would make the corporations and the trial attorneys and the insurance companies that work for them into the good guys. It's difficult to even imagine. We know what we know, but how do we get other people to see that? And a simple truth is this, is that people will tend to chase one villain at a time, okay? And so if we are the villain, they will chase us down with their pitchforks and their and such. So the real question becomes, where is there villainy in the plaintiff bar? Where is the narrative of selfishness across the plaintiff bar? Well, it's there to see. It's there to see in the advertisements. It's there to see on the billboards. It's there to see also if we care to look and if we care to show people in the way that they will sucker in and then abandon without representation most of the people. If they attract someone with their billboards and their ads who has a valid but small claim, what do the billboard plaintiff attorneys do? They abandon them, because what they're doing is running a numbers game as they look for that big hit. And they don't care if the liability is there or not. They just look for the big damages. And so what's really happening here is you have people who have legitimate but small claims that are looking for representation. They churn them and then they burn them as they go. And then what do? They go into the courtroom and they spin a narrative designed to fool jurors into making the wrong decision. This is villainy as much as the stories of corporate villainy. These stories are just as compelling, and we as a group need to be doing a better job of getting this story out into the national psyche.
They get away with it because by the time we get to the ball game, when the jury's starting to be picked, the jury's already got some preconceived notions.
That's right.
So we have to, and it's a little bit of an uphill battle. It's always been the David versus Goliath story since David and Goliath, and that's the way the plaintiff bar operates. But we have to. I think this is just thought for consideration. If our jurors knew through the public processes how much every product they buy has an add-on cost for insurance, verdicts, plaintiff attorneys, throw up there that Mark Lanier got $500 million fee, a $500 million fee on a case. Some will say, hey, great, he's making right injustice. But most people will go, wait, this $23 pair of blue jeans has $2.89 to go to the plaintiff lawyers one way or another. It is just thoughts. We must move on, Adam, because it's hopping on the on the screen.
Yeah, we got one more question here.
Yep.
Is there time to address that? Is that where we're going?
Yeah. Are you talking about the commentators? Yeah. Some.
Yeah. Go ahead. Yep.
Some commentators have talked about the impact of the quote hollowing out of American middle, unquote. That is the erosion of the middle class. Do you see this as a factor in nuclear verdicts? And that's one's for you, Adam.
Yes. My answer to that is absolutely. That's what I call the two Americas. Whether that is occurring on a grand scale or on a small scale is something that can be debated by the sociologists and the economists, et cetera. What we see, though, is that there is a widespread belief that the middle is under attack, is diminishing, is deteriorating, and that the middle class, in its absence, has created an us and them society. We are all aware of this. Us and them thinking is what happens when people are at war, what happens when people are in conflict with each other. It is the essence of the tribal politics, the identity politics that we all experience today. And this is just as common in the deliberation room as it is the voting booth. And so when people come in with a belief that there are now two Americas, one for the elite and one for the abandoned, they see those same characters and those same narratives in the fact pattern itself. And a belief in that perspective, as much as anything, I think, is at the heart of these nuclear verdicts, because what is the virtue of a nuclear verdict in the mind of a juror who has given $2 billion on a case where that's 100 times the value anyone evaluated? Why would they do that? Toward what end? Are they villains themselves? Not at all. They're trying to fix the country. They're trying to send a message and they're trying to put an end to what they see as an egregious situation. So the question, is the hollowing out of the American middle related to nuclear verdicts? Absolutely. We need to start to see why jurors are doing this so that we can learn how to prevent them.
And I would throw in on that, when I look at a jury pool, my town that I'm in, my county that I'm in, may have a fair amount of the upper crust, but not much of the upper crust makes it to the jury pool. For some reason, they get off, whatever. Now, with the erosion of the middle class, that was what I would rely on to go with the upper class to hold things down, the CEOs and that sort of thing. Now what we'll have is more of the what people themselves consider to be the downtrodden. And anytime you've got 12 downtrodden on the jury, you probably won't like the trodden they'll be doing. Is that a fair statement, Adam?
Yes, yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
One more question to you, and then I will let you flee, and I'll talk about Moderna for just a second. From the question, you can tell that people think some of the message may be doom and gloom, but you also made a comment of hope. And this questioner wanted to know a little bit more about what gives you real hope for the litigation future.
To me, what gives me hope is that out of any crisis comes opportunity. Prior to the pandemic, absolutely the hottest discussion topic at the conferences that we all go to was the question of, can anything be done to stop the acceleration of the social inflation factors? The increase in the size and frequency of nuclear verdicts, all of the patterns that make up that term social inflation. What can be done? Can anything be done? Will it slow? Is it ever going to peak? Or is it just going to continue to accelerate? Prior to the pandemic, I think, my answer would have been, I don't see any change coming. As we continue to go into and through this pandemic, however, what I'm beginning to realize, and I want other people to be aware of, is that this is creating, and it's, among other things, a giant reset in terms of how our culture sees everything, the threats that we all face. I talked earlier about the experience that all of us are having right now as we make risk-reward decisions about our safety, the safety of our loved ones, about our economic safety. Are we going to reopen, or should we stay quarantined? Everyone is engaged in a large national and personal debate that comes down to making risk-reward decisions. These are defense themes. So the ability for us to connect with jurors and have them stand in the shoes of a defendant who's made reasonable risk-reward decisions is now a far easier message than in the past. In the past, people were fascinated by the us and the them and looking for is this one of those corporate villains? Let's teach them a lesson. Let's get them. I think that quite possibly there will be a large reset. What that new world is, I can't say for sure, but I'm beginning to think that maybe the social inflation world is over. And I hope the new one from a litigation perspective is better. We don't know, but I think that things are going to change.
And I agree with one of our questioners that we have to grab the narrative, folks. We do have a reset here now for corporate America, for insurance America. Let's not let it slip away. Let's get the reset coming our way so we can get the ball back to the middle, okay? Adam has to leave, but Adam, I want to thank you. Adam, I've enjoyed this, as I always do, doing our research trial work and everything. Would you be willing to come back with me on occasion, probably several occasions, to go over more things and how they're developing?
Yes, yeah, I'd be glad to. Yeah, I enjoy these as well. Yeah.
I know we've got the research trials coming up on the nursing home stuff, and we can't talk about those things specifically, but I think the big picture items we're seeing about the nuclear verdicts, the fallout, how people are reacting, I think we can start extrapolating for the ladies and gentlemen of our listening audience to help them.
Yeah, well, it's a dynamic situation, and I love to talk about it. So I'm glad to come back when you'll have me.
All right, Adam, be good. Have fun today.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks, everyone.
Ladies and gentlemen, I know it's our time is running, but I saved one last thing, and it's a big subject, and it's on Moderna, and most of you have probably caught up with it or stayed up with it. That's the trouble about the cycle of news now. Yesterday's news is old news, but I wanted to give us all some hope, but give us some perspective on what we're looking at with Moderna and their phase 1 testing. They tested 45 people in phase 1. We have now reports back on 8, and all 8, to my understanding, had antibodies as if they had the COVID virus or better. So it was a significant first step. But remember, these are healthy volunteers that were doing it. There's no belief yet that it will apply to someone that is 70 with diabetes, high blood pressure, et cetera. That's more steps down the road, but this is how it gets started. Note that if this is even approved, it's Q1 of 2021 realistically. Now they could come in maybe December, but Q1 2021 that is likely to start coming out on the market. And then, we get back to what Adam Boesen was talking about. Well, then does the supply chain get it out? Does Cardinal Health get blamed for not getting it moved and getting it out because it didn't get to Washington State? It's still fraught with dangers about getting it out. How long has President Trump been saying anybody in America can get tested, and we're still waiting for anybody in America to get tested? It's not easy. It takes a lot of activity. But anyway, that is a good hope. Let's go back to phase 1 of this particular trial. Phase 1 had 45 participants. The purpose of phase 1 is only to evaluate safety. That's that they want to make sure it's safe and can work with the public. So it's not a deep dive. And 70% of the drugs that are attempted to put on the market do get past phase 1 because they're just shown to be safe enough that they're far more safe than unsafe for the public, at least in a very minimal testing procedure. Phase 2 of Moderna plans on having 600 participants to evaluate if the new drug is effective. This will be, there won't be too many double blinds there, I don't think, but they got a big, huge cross section. We're going to see people in there that have these comorbidities that they'll test and see how it comes out, and do they build antibodies? Did it hurt them? One, but did they build antibodies in the process? Out of phase 2, 33% pass out of phase 2. Only 33% get out of phase 2. Phase 3, that'll be, Moderna is planning 30,000 participants. And what they'll be doing is confirming phase 1 and phase 2. And it's on a massive scale, 30,000 people. They'll be doing blind, double blind. There will be people that are taking placebo to see what the placebo effect is in the whole process. When you get down to the end and you've started out at phase 1, only about 10% of the folks that started phase 1 get through phase 3. Now that's not bad. And Moderna, let's hope it's the one. It's going to be the quickest. But don't bet the farm on it. My last comment is, if you were in Vegas, how much would you bet on a 10% chance of winning? Okay. We always hope in Vegas, that it's going to be that 10% that comes in for us. Here's my advice to you, and this is the way I run. I've got 4 law offices. This is the way I run them. This is the way I run my life. I hope for the best, but I plan for the worst. So folks, I recommend that you plan that Moderna won't make it. And if it does, great. You'll come through in flying colors. But hunker down, be ready for the long term, that it may be next summer before we get something, maybe later. Folks, I will let you all get back to work now. Do let us know if you want to hear more about the jury pools, because it is one of my subjects, just a favorite of mine. And we will plan on doing this once a month if people want to follow it and keep up on it. So let us know, and we will catch you next trip. You all be safe out there, and we'll see you on the next episode.